Oh, welcome in. What's going on? Brian Noe in for Jake Query here today, alongside my compadre, Eddie Van Garrison. Huh? That's your unofficial middle name, Eddie. I don't know what your real middle name is, but I think you should switch it to Van.
I'm glad you remember that.
You're named after Eddie Van Halen. You should be Eddie Van Garrison. What is your official middle name?
Thomas.
Thomas.
Yep.
See, Van is way cooler than Thomas. I don't want to. Yep, right?
I have to have a word with my parents.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay, so lots going on here today. I'm going to get to the Purdue men getting to a Sweet 16 for a sixth time in 8 years. That's a great accomplishment. But I start today with the IU women because the IU women, they took on South Carolina yesterday, and they fought hard. They played really well. And this is going to sound like a moral victory. Hey, they played tough. They came up short, but man, but it really is true. Like, I'm not a big moral victory person. I'm not, you played tough, you came up short, but by golly, you gave it the old college try. I'm not wired like that, but I think that there's nuance to some of these things. We can't act like everybody is in the same category. Like every team is a 10-point favorite. And they fought hard. They came up a little bit short, but gosh, what an effort. All things are not the same. You look at the IU women, they were 24.5-point underdogs against South Carolina, who they're the defending champs. They won it all last season. They beat Caitlin Clark in Iowa to win a title. So to have a lead at halftime, to lose by 11 points, there's no shame in that at all. And plus, this is on the road. This isn't like the men's tournament where we're playing a neutral site game. This is on the road. That crowd was going bananas. You can hear it in some of the audio clips that we have for you. And I'll tell you what, we have spared no expense with audio clips for this show. You will hear quite a bit of Lady Gaga and Abracadabra, which is the official theme of the men's tournament. You don't love that, Eddie? I think we should go to every commercial break and come out of every commercial break with Abracadabra from Lady Gaga. Do you disagree with that?
I've heard it too many times. Like, can we play something else? I'd rather hear the March Madness theme song 20 times than the Abracadabra.
I'm okay with it. I'm all right with it. It's the official anthem of the tournament this year. Whatever. It's fine with me. But, we've spared no expense with the audio selections for this show. But for anybody, and I can't imagine IU fans are walking away like, goodness, what was that? But anybody who pushes back in general on moral victories, because there are a lot of those people out there, right? Anybody who pushes back, I think that from time to time, it makes all the sense in the world given the set of circumstances. So for the IU women going up against South Carolina, listen at the end of the game. So South Carolina wins, and listen on ABC what the commentators are talking about as far as the resume of South Carolina over the last 4 years in the tournament. Check this out.
South Carolina back to the Sweet 16. They have loved this tournament the last 4 seasons, 18-1 in the NCAA tournament over the last 4 seasons.
18-1 over the last 4 years. They're winning titles, deep tournament runs, lots of success, defending champions. You're playing on the road, the crowd's going nuts, and you keep it respectable the whole game. South Carolina only scored 25 points in the first half. They woke up and scored 26 points in the third quarter alone. You got to love basketball when that happens. There's so many things that you just cannot explain fully. That's one of them. South Carolina, 25 points and a half, 26 points in a quarter. Okay, cool, whatever. but IU played them tough in the first half, had a lead. I just thought, I watched that game and I was like, man, IU came to play, man. That's a respectable game right there. Also, this was something that was mentioned during the game, the depth of South Carolina. It's important to think about this, what IU was up against on the road against South Carolina in terms of the depth. Check this out again on ABC.
South Carolina first in the nation in bench points per game. Indiana 318th in bench points per game.
Good Lord. So depth, let's just think about that for a second. Depth, sort of a big deal in basketball, right? Where if South Carolina's just sending waves at you, all right, this girl's freaking nice. Yeah, she's in our rotation. She's like our sixth man / sixth woman, you know. This other girl, she's 7th. She's freaking nice, too. Not cracking the starting lineup, but she gets minutes. This other girl, she gets minutes as well. She's kind of 8th in the rotation. Like, IU doesn't have that. So if IU gets in any foul trouble, they're in the 300th percentile, you know, that category here with bench points. So it's a huge deal for the game. You have all of that against you, and you keep it close. I think this also, when you look at women's college basketball, it really is the haves and the have-nots. There is a Grand Canyon-sized difference between the haves and the have-nots. If you look at some of these scores, UConn won by 69 points the other day. Like, some of these scores are just, it's like Looney Tunes type stuff. You will not see this in the men's game. We'll get to NIL and the impact on the mid-majors and not having bigger upsets in the tournament, but you can't look at the men's tournament and see some of the scores that you see in the women's tournament. Like, I'm looking at it. UConn beat Arkansas State 103-34. When do you see that on the men's side? And this is not me, you know, ripping the women's game. I'm not. I'm just saying there are haves and have-nots. I'm not putting IU in the have-not category, but they don't have the talent that South Carolina has. They don't have the roster this season that South Carolina has. They don't. And if you compare it, again, IU 24.5-point underdogs yesterday. You compare that to the men's game, like Baylor, they weren't 24.5-point underdogs against Duke. That game happened yesterday. Like, Duke's a healthy 12.5-point favorite. That's half of what IU was, you know, like, or half of what South Carolina was as a favorite. If you look at another 1 seed taking on a 9 seed, that would be Creighton. When they played Auburn on Saturday, Creighton wasn't a 24.5-point underdog. They're like 8.5-point underdogs, right? So it matters. And for IU to keep it close like that, I thought it was a very respectable showing. I walked away saying, wow, man, IU gave them everything that they could handle. You know, when Dawn Staley is on the bench in the second half cursing because there's a turnover or IU's making life difficult, like, man, we can't get going. What are we doing over here? Like, you played pretty well. This was something else that was mentioned during the game. This is Chloe Moore McNeil. And if you don't know the story, I'm sure IU women's hoops fans do. I did not know this story. Shame on me. But they mentioned it during the game. And I thought, wow, man, this just has to be highlighted and talked about because they did a great job on ABC telling this story. Listen to what happened on Chloe Moore McNeil's 16th birthday. This is crazy, but check this out.
Chloe Moore McNeil, a fifth-year player who has been through so much. On her 16th birthday, she found out her mother had passed away. And all of a sudden, she became an even bigger role model for her 3 younger sisters.
Yeah, she even thought about, when her mom passed, of stopping playing basketball so that she could take care of her 3 sisters. And her grandbrother said, no, you must continue to live on and to pursue your dreams. So she's done both, and she's done them both beautifully in taking care of her sister and what she's doing at the University of Indiana.
Wow. I mean, wow. Think about that. It's your 16th birthday and your mom passes away. You're thinking about, no longer playing basketball, taking care of your sisters. That's real life at 16 years old, you know? And she stuck with basketball. Her family convinced her, no, you got to keep playing. We'll figure it out. We'll find a way. That's some real stuff right there. And I love that ABC told that story because, I mean, that goes well beyond basketball. It obviously impacts basketball and Chloe's career, but for her and her family to kind of just pull through that whole moment. And not just a moment, but that burden, like that loss, the whole thing that comes with it. And you're 16 years old, and that's thrown at you. Like, hats off to her and her family, the way that they've handled that situation. So I loved that story. Obviously, I hated that it happened to Chloe and her family, but the way they handled it and dealt with it, that has to be applauded. So I love that they told that story during the game yesterday. Something else that was talked about, Sydney Parrish. So Sydney, before the game against South Carolina, she basically said, like, yeah, South Carolina, they were better last season than this season. And you know how it goes. Everybody's going to be like, whoa, okay, all right, smack talk, here we go. Look, man, I think it's interesting. I'll put it this way. If you say something like that, you got to back it up, and you got to be ready for everything that comes with that. And Sydney, I mean, she didn't play exceptional. She had 6 points on 2 of 7 shooting, had 4 boards, 4 rebounds. I don't think there was anything out of line. I don't think there was anything there that was just like, she didn't say, yeah, they pretty much suck. Like that would be a big deal. She's like, yeah, they're better last season than this season. I just think that in sports, and Sydney's probably well aware of this, in sports, any type of comment like this can be blown up into something much bigger than it was ever in the first place or ever intended in the first place. And while I don't have any problem with it, while I don't think that South Carolina, the whole game was like, let's make Sydney Parrish eat her words. I don't think at halftime when South Carolina was down by a point, Dawn Staley was like, you remember what Sydney Parrish had to say? I think a lot of times we make a bigger deal out of this stuff than there is to make. That men's game included. Like, there is such a thing as bulletin board material and extra fuel. And if you're a competitor and the other team says something, if the Raiders make fun of Mahomes sounding like Kermit the Frog, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to add another layer of fuel there. I'll never forget Tom Brady. Remember Tom Brady when he was with the Patriots? They were undefeated, and I think it was Anthony Smith. There was this rookie defensive back for the Steelers. And he had made a comment about the Patriots, and I can't even remember what he exactly said. Like, maybe they were a little overrated, something like that. And I'll never forget, the Patriots scored a touchdown, and you see Tom Brady talking directly to Anthony Smith. Like, we didn't forget what you said, right? So, yes, there are times where comments that seem to be like, shrug your shoulders. Yeah, I don't think they're as good this season as last season. They can be built up into something much bigger. I don't think that was ever a big part of the game yesterday against South Carolina. But it's just one of those things where I think as an athlete, you're asked a question, you give an answer, you don't think anything of it, and the next thing you find out, it's like, holy cow, this is a huge deal. Like they're talking about it on SportsCenter now. Like, whoa, I never intended for that to happen. I didn't think it was a big deal. I don't think that's why IU lost. It was just one of those storylines to talk about. But I think there's a difference between a storyline and something that has a huge impact in a game. I thought that was a storyline, but didn't have a huge impact in the game. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. Feel free to hit us up. The red carpet is always rolled out for you. Love being interactive on this show. Eddie, did you watch the women's game? Any thoughts on the women's game before I move to the Purdue men and Matt Painter catching Frisbees? Anything that stood out to you?
I did not have a chance to catch the women's game yesterday, but it didn't surprise me that Indiana was hanging in with South Carolina because they played South Carolina really, really well last year. I don't know how much you remember that game last year, but Indiana had like a terrible first half. They're down by like 15 to 18 points at halftime, and then they have a ferocious comeback. And I think they ended up losing by 4 to South Carolina. And they were like the only team in the tournament that really competed with Dawn Staley's crew. So it didn't totally shock me that IU was competitive yesterday against South Carolina, but it would have been nice to see them pull it out for sure.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. But, hey, I thought it was a strong showing. I mean, that's the thing. When you're like think you're a gambler, Eddie. You know, like if you are a random game that your team is involved in, and you're like, hey, what's the spread? We're 24.5-point underdogs. It's like, oh, gosh, that's oof. Our chances of winning outright are very, very, very slim. So if you tell me, hey, we're leading at halftime, I'm doing like shirtless somersaults. You know what I mean? Like that matters. And so for IU to hang like that and to play that well, some people will roll their eyes at the moral victory thing, but how do you feel about that in general, Eddie? Because I think given the set of circumstances, if you're 24.5-point dogs and you win by 11, or you lose by 11, like that, there's something to be said for that, where you're playing that tough, making life that difficult. That means something. I don't think that you should just wipe that away and say, I'm never with moral victories. Maybe you shouldn't just classify it like that. You know, it's making life difficult. Did IU make life difficult for South Carolina yesterday? Absolutely. And that matters.
Yeah, they dealt with injuries for the most of the season. So, like, it was a little bit of a roller coaster season for Terry Morin this year. There was a lot of debate late in the year if they would even have enough on their resume to make into the tournament, but they ended up making some in the Big Ten tournament, and next thing you know, they're in again. And I was like, maybe they'll get a nice draw to where they can compete and make a potential run as one of those Cinderella teams. But then I saw South Carolina second. I'm like, well, it was fun while it lasted with that hope and dream. But yeah, I mean, 32-3 now are the Gamecocks this season, and you're just hoping if you're going to that game, if you're Terry Moore, that the ladies out there on the floor are competing their tails off, and they try to make it a game, in which they did, and hopefully they put something on tape so South Carolina can't win another championship, because I wonder if a lot of people like myself are getting a little tired of the same team winning it all the time. Yeah,
hey, man, I hear you on that. No doubt about it. A little bit later in the show, Eddie, I was thinking about this. You know, I watched the women's game, the full game yesterday, and I thought, you know what? What if I'm an expert level women's college basketball better? You know what I mean? Wouldn't it be sad if I was really good and could be printing money and I'm not making bets? I'm not firing? You know, so we're going to experiment here, because we've got a couple of women's basketball games going on during the show today.
I think one's underway right now.
That's right. We got NC State ahead of Michigan State 18-9. You know, so I'm gonna try this little experiment during the show. Maybe it'll be a first half pick, you know, a full game pick, something like that. Let's test our level of expertise right here. You know, just a trial. I'm not going to actually bet it and fire away, but let's act as if we are and see if we're onto something or not here, Eddie. What do you think about this?
I mean, Texas is an 18.5-point favorite against Illinois, so what are we looking at here?
You know, I saw that. I don't know as much about that game. I would look. They don't give you as many options to bet these games. Mm-mm. You know, I would love to bet like a team total under for Texas's opponent. Like the total for the game is very, very low, and Texas is a huge favorite, which tells me Texas is not going to be allowing that many points, right? So I would love to fade the other team, but I'm not given that option, you know? So we got a limited menu over here with options to bet. We can't do the props, a lot of things that we're limited to. Illinois, I would look to fade them. Now, let me get some love here for the Purdue men, because they beat McNeese. They're going to the Sweet 16. Eddie, this is the 6th time in the last 8 tournaments that Purdue has reached the Sweet 16. And I think that absolutely has to be pointed out, because a lot of the talk about Matt Painter is what he hasn't done. You heard that in this tournament. There were reasons people were picking against Purdue to even get to the Sweet 16, is some people refer to him as Purdon't. And, you can't forget about losing to Fairleigh Dickinson. And, well, what about this? And there's a lot of that out there. And so for Matt Painter and Purdue to reach another Sweet 16, I'm sure there were a lot of people, I was one of them, to say, wow, the 6th year in 8 tournaments where they've reached the Sweet 16. That's something right there. Kelvin Sampson of Houston, that'll be Purdue's opponent. This is his 6th straight Sweet 16. Mark Few at Gonzaga, they didn't reach it this year, but before the season, 9 straight Sweet 16 appearances. So that's the thing, right? Like, if you're giving Mark Few bouquets of flowers And you should, because that's a heck of an accomplishment. How many times do teams that are very talented lose in the first round? Upset City, Jay Wright at Villanova. He's doing the coverage there for TNT, TBS, True TV. I don't know which one he's on. He's on one of them. He's doing the coverage for like the whole entity, if you will, right? And he was like, man, I can't tell you how impressive that accomplishment is for Mark Few. As a guy who's lost in the first round, to go to the Sweet 16 9 straight seasons is really hard to do. Very impressive. I don't think getting to 6 Sweet 16. Wow. 6 Sweet 16s.
Tongue twister?
You got to go slowly, Eddie, and you got to enunciate that thing. You know, it's like bulging disc. You know, you really got to slow it down and not end up on the internet if you screw that thing up. 6 Sweet 16s in 8 years. That is not that far of a cry from 9 straight. It's at least in the vicinity. So the point is, if you're giving Mark Few bouquets, if you're giving Kelvin Sampson bouquets, which I think you should for 6 straight Sweet 16s, I think you got to give Matt Painter his due for 6 Sweet 16s in 8 seasons. That's pretty good. Kaufman-Wren was a monster on the glass. What did he end up with? Like 15 boards?
He put up Zach Edey numbers.
Guy was a vacuum cleaner on the glass over there. And I do love Braden Smith, man. Like, he had 8 turnovers. That he's got to cut that down against Houston. If he's got 8 turnovers against Houston, it's going to be ugly. But Braden Smith, I mean, All-American, first-teamer, and the competitiveness. I feel like that's a huge, huge deal when you go up against Houston, because there are a number of times he forces a turnover, and he might have got it knocked to the floor, and he's just pointing, and he's like, that effing way. Like, it's our ball. We're going this way. Like, I love the grit of Braden Smith. We all talk about his assists and his scoring ability, and he's a fantastic player, but that's one of the things that stood out in that game against McNeese is just the grittiness and how important that's going to be against Houston. I thought that absolutely stood out. Now, I don't know if you caught this. After the game,
this is great.
There was a funny interaction. You're right. You caught this, Eddie? So you'll hear the audio. Let's just throw the audio your way, and then there'll be an explanation. So Purdue beat McNeese, and there's a reporter like, hey, Matt Painter, you want to catch a Frisbee? He's like, what? Check this out.
Is this post-game tradition?
Danny did it after he won last year.
Well, hell yeah, I want to do it now. You got too much free time, Zach. What do you got?
All right, now you're going to go viral.
Huh?
You're going to go viral. Danny won catching this last
You
year.
think that was the reason? Not Donovan Klingon?
That helped.
Not Caravan. Not that. The Frisbee.
Yeah, so there you go. That's what it was all about, where Danny Hurley, he caught the Frisbee after UConn won a championship last season, and so the reporter is like, hey, Matt, you want to do the same thing? And now you're going to go viral over here. And Matt's like, okay, that's the reason why, huh? Not Donovan Klingon, not Alex Caravan. It was the Frisbee. All right, cool. You know, we could just pencil Purdue in as national champs, I think, Eddie, right? Like, it's a done deal over here. That was funny.
Oh, yeah, go place your wagers now.
By the way, I got to tell you a funny story. So I'm here in Las Vegas right now. I've been here for, I don't know, like 3 or 4 months. And you can you hear some weed whacking going on? Can you hear some general maintenance going on outside, Eddie? How loud is this?
Reminds me of the days of like when I was in elementary school and in high school, where you heard whomever it was, you know, if it was the janitor guy or if it was like a landscaping business mowing the grass, and all the teachers would open up the windows and you can smell the grass clippings. It makes me think of baseball, and it makes me think of opening day.
Well, good. You know, I think it puts a smile on your face. It's a happy memory. Maybe people driving around or listening to the show, this puts a smile on their faces as well. It's funny. I'll tell you a very, very quick story. So I was doing local radio in Portland, and this was during the pandemic. So I was doing the show from my place. And Eddie, someone was literally right outside my window, and it was like they had a jackhammer powered weed whacker. You know what I mean? Like, it was a weed whacker or a lawnmower on steroids. And I'm just like, hey, man, I'm so sorry about the noise. And the producer and the guy running the board, they were like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you don't hear that? Are you serious? They couldn't hear it. So maybe you have like supersonic headphones or hearing ability. I don't know. Or things have changed from that time to this time. But I'm sure the maintenance outside will cease pretty soon. All right, we got a lot to do. We got football on the brain here. We got some Colts news. Lots of basketball to get into. We will have, I want to mention the guests over here, Eddie Garrison, hard at work. We got Mike Chappell at 1 o'clock, CBS 4, Fox 59. Get you a healthy heaping of Colts and beyond. I saw Mike was tweeting up a storm about March Madness, so I'm curious about his thoughts. Sam King at 2 o'clock. He works for the Lafayette Journal and Courier. We'll talk some Purdue hoops. How about them being in Indy, taking on Houston? So we'll get into all of that good stuff. Coming up next, there are two very, very different formats. Which one is your preference? We'll get into that coming up. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I'm Brian Noe in for Jake Query here today on The Fan. By the way, Eddie, I saw that Van Halen 2 turned 46 a day or two ago. I got an alert on my phone. I have an app. It's connected to that. And it's like, hey, celebrate Van Halen 2 turning 46. I'm like, holy cow. 46 years old. That's insane. Not one of their best albums, I would say, Eddie. You have Van Halen 2. If you look at, I was looking up, like, all right, what? Dance the Night Away. That's an okay song. It's an all right song, but
it's okay.
Nothing amazing on that one, I don't think. Nothing great. There's some other great Van Halen albums, but that Dance the Night Away is another one that's well known. Not bad. That's kind of like a feel good song right there, but you can't go wrong with David Lee, right? That's your motto, isn't it, Eddie?
I prefer Sammy, but I don't have any hatred towards David Lee Roth. I just prefer Sammy Hagar.
Yeah, I don't get it. You and Dane Fife, I do not understand you people. I do not. If you love songs, maybe that's the thing. Maybe you and Dane, you're love song people. There's nothing wrong with that, but they became a love song band with Sammy Hagar. I prefer rock and fun with David Lee, but hey, different strokes, right? Different strokes for different folks. How it goes. We got a lot to do here, Eddie. So first off, let me enter in a fake bet, if you will. Okay, I'm looking at the halftime number here. NC State, they're putting it on Michigan State. It's 31-12. So they're ahead by 19 points. The live line at halftime is NC State minus 19.5. I'm going to lay the points, Eddie. I'm saying they're ahead by 20 points at halftime. Okay, we're testing this out.
Okay.
I watched the IU women's game yesterday. I thought, man, it would be really sad if I was like an expert level like handicapper when it comes to women's basketball here. So let's give it a trial run. What do you say, Eddie? Are you with me on this?
I'm down.
20-point lead. Okay.
As the kids say, I'm tailing you.
Okay, good. It's moved. Like, you got to be quick. You got to be quick on the draw. It's minus 20.5 right now.
Look at you, already changing the lines and everything.
That's right. I move lines over here, Eddie. Fill in radio in the Indianapolis market, you would be shocked how quickly lines move based on, advice like that. It's crazy how fast word travels. We'll get to the formats here in a second, but I want to ask a stupid question, Eddie. Okay. First off, this is not the stupid question, but refresh my memory, are you an IU fan?
Yes.
Are you like a big IU Hoops fan?
I know enough.
Okay. All right. But you are fully, you could speak for IU Hoops fans if you
Slightly.
aren't indeed.
Sometimes.
Okay,
I'm not as extreme as some others, but yeah, I'm a fan.
Okay. Here's the first stupid question. I really don't know this answer. That's why I'm asking. Was there any part of you, even, we're talking 3% of you, that was like, Purdue, Sweet 16, good for them? You're a little bit happy for them. Any portion of you that felt that way?
I'm not really sure. Like, I'm more happy for the kids on the team than anything else. Like, if they didn't say Purdue on the front, I'd probably be happy, like, and rooting for them, because it's not because they're Indiana's rival. But if they just had, like, Clemson or somebody else, like, with the way that Matt Pander's built that team with a bunch of kids from Indiana, he doesn't do it through the portal and doesn't rely on NIL to bring players in. I mean, they're an easy team to root for. But in the aspect of being an Indiana fan, I can't root for them. But I can't root for Kelvin Sampson either. Well,
that's the other part of it, right? Was there any portion of you, like you're telling me 0%, that was like, for someone to say, hey, Kelvin, 6th Sweet 16 in a row, like that's good for him. No part of you, 0. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. Like, good for you. Congrats, you made it to 6 consecutive Sweet 16s, but hey, remember what you did to Indiana? I don't.
Hey, and listen, there's nothing wrong with that. I completely get it. Rivalries, that'd be like, if somebody asked me, I'm a diehard Notre Dame football fan. if anybody asked me, like, hey, is there a little piece of you that was happy for Jim Harbaugh and Michigan winning a national championship? No, none, zero. Do you realize what it was like? Heaven forbid Notre Dame lost to Michigan when I was a kid. That's all you would hear about for the whole year. I'm from South Bend. There are a lot of Michigan fans, believe it or not. They just grew up resenting Notre Dame because that's all they hear about. So if Notre Dame lost, oh my gosh, like that's all you would hear about. So no, if someone's like, hey, you feel good Michigan beat Washington? No, of course not. So that's what I wondered about as a diehard IU hoops fan. Would you say that's generally the way it goes? If you said the average of a diehard IU hoops fan, the average fan, is not happy whatsoever for Purdue. The average fan is not happy whatsoever for Kelvin Sampson. Would that be true, or would we bump that average up? Like, there's Joe over there, and he's 50% like, hey, man, good for Kelvin. You know, he really resurrected that, or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
What would you say the average is for the diehards over there?
It's fascinating because Kevin Bowen at KBowen 1070 from the Fan Morning Show has a pullout, and they were discussing it this morning on their show. And Kevin has a poll, and it says, IU fans, who you cheering for on Friday night, Kelvin Sampson or Purdue? And it is pretty much 50-50. It's 51.3% Kelvin Sampson, 48.7% Purdue. So it's literally going to depend on the fan, honestly. It's pretty much going to be 50-50 either way.
I like this, too. Or if they added, like a third choice, which would be neither. You know, that could be close to 100%. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
That'll be mine. I'll rip off KB's idea, which is a great idea, and I'll add a third choice, which is, hey, who are you rooting for, IU hoops fans? Is it Purdue? Is it Kelvin Sampson? Or is it neither? You know, and we know neither would win. I don't know if it would be a clean sweep. Could be. Okay, the other thing here is the formats. Which format do you prefer? I'm thinking about this watching the IU ladies yesterday. So they're on the road against South Carolina. What an atmosphere, right? It's loud. They said that over the last 10 seasons in women's college hoops that South Carolina has led everybody in attendance, which makes a lot of sense. They're having a lot of success. It's the show in town. But that's the thing, man, is they're loud. That atmosphere there, it's like, it's real. And I couldn't have, the seats stood out to me too, Eddie. It wasn't just the front row. These plush, look like leather seats, like really nice. It's like you go to a nice movie theater, and it was like those type of seats. And it looked like it was the entire 100 level, like these plush seats. And I'm like, man, they've cranked things up over there at South Carolina. But which would you rather have? Would you rather have the first two rounds be at home arenas where you get those atmospheres like yesterday at South Carolina? Do you prefer that on the ladies' side, or do you prefer it on the men's side where we've got neutral site games and you know how it goes over there? I much rather prefer having home stadiums, having home arenas, home crowds. I think also what's really important, this could make the regular season more important. That's a huge, huge deal. Because think on the men's side, a lot of times people don't pay attention until football season is over. So if you have a big early season game and it could directly impact who gets a home game, who doesn't get a home game, right? Like the first two rounds, like you might think of yesterday, Duke and Baylor. If that's at Duke, if Auburn taking on Creighton is not at a neutral site, but it's on the road, it's at Auburn, right? Like I think some of those regular season games are spruced up a little bit more. And I also think the atmospheres would be so much better. The atmospheres on the women's side, when you're playing in home arenas, you're not getting that at a neutral site. You're not getting crowds that are that into the game the whole time at a neutral site. It's just not happening. There are many times where you'll see the first 5 rows, there's no one there. There's nobody there. There are a lot of times on the men's side, the atmosphere is brutal. I would much rather have home games for the first 2 rounds on the men's side. Eddie, you got to vote here. What would you sign up for? Would you like to see, put it this way, would you like to see the men mimic what the women have with their format and home games the first 2 rounds? Or would you rather see the women say, you know what, no more home games. Let's do what the men do. Let's just do all neutral site games. I would much rather see the men copy the women.
I see it from both perspectives here, because when I was watching some of the games on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and a little bit yesterday, I'm looking at these matchups, and I'm like, okay, St. Mary's is playing Vanderbilt. St. Mary's is the favorite here. Vanderbilt has the home crowd advantage because St. Mary's has to travel all the way from the West Coast to Cleveland, Ohio. So, like, you're looking at some of these underdogs that have the fan advantage because they have the shorter travel. That's just one of them. And then there was another one yesterday. I was looking at it. I think it was Ole Miss in North Carolina. The game's in Milwaukee. Ole Miss is all the way down to Mississippi. You've got no first 2 rounds like the women, but the pushback that I have on that is playing these neutral site games allows for these Cinderella teams to have a chance because they don't have to deal with going into a hostile environment that they don't get to play in during the course of the regular season, just because the fan turnout for some of these non-Power 4, Power 5 schools doesn't match that. So when you have the neutral site games, talked about this with Jake last week, let's say you have a 5-12 game like Colorado State and Memphis, for example, and then you have a blue blood coming in after that. Well, next thing you know, you've got those fans that are a part of the underdog of the next game cheering for Colorado State. Next thing you know, it's like the whole arena is cheering for the underdog to knock off, the favorite in the game. And that's the part of college basketball that I enjoy the most. So if push comes to shove and you're forcing me to choose one, I'm sticking with the neutral site floor.
You would stick with neutral site. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, like, again, some people like Sammy Hagar over David Lee Roth. It's crazy. Some people like neutral sites, but no, I hear you. Listen, that would be the concern, is it would be harder for the mid-majors, for the underdogs to go on the road and win games. And if you love the upsets, those would be harder to come by. They wouldn't be impossible. Believe it or not, home teams lose games. Road teams win games. It does happen. I just think that if you're the higher seed, it strengthens the importance of the regular season. And so, in the atmospheres here, and the other thing is, even though there wouldn't be as many upsets, the upsets that you do get, and you would be getting, they're even more special when you go on the road in their arena and you take them down. Like, that's the stuff of legend right there. So any of those games, like, imagine think of these upsets throughout the years, like Duke loses to Lehigh. Imagine if Lehigh did that at Cameron. You know what I mean? Or, like Kentucky loses to St. Peter's, but it's in Lexington. And, oh, my gosh, that takes it to another level. So I think you have to balance those two things out. You would have less upsets, but the upsets that you do have would be, it's like twice the upset at once, because you do it truly on the road. I would be for it. I like what the ladies have going on there, their format. I prefer that than the men's. Your comments more than welcome here. Feel free to check in. We'll roll out the red carpet for you. You want to pop on the air, we'll get you on. All right, coming up next, are you upset over a lack of upsets? I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I'm Brian Noe in for Query here on the Fan. Eddie, good news. We're 1-0.
That's
with
right.
The women's college basketball picks. We might be expert level.
I was about to say, do we stop now while we're up?
Oh, no. We keep looking for angles over here, We might keep firing. How about this one? Okay, here's one. Full game. So NC State ahead of Michigan State by 24. It's 47-23 at halftime, okay? NC State, for the game, they're minus 24.5. So they have to win the second half by a point. What do you think? They lose a little bit of focus, or they crank this thing up to at least a 25-point win?
Will Michigan State leave their players in at the end and will...
Well, that's true. They might fight to the bitter end. I was watching last night, Eddie. It was the last game of the night, UCLA. They were thumping... Gosh, who were they playing? I can't remember. They were thumping someone. But they took the foot right off the accelerator at the end of the game. So that can happen. I'm going to lay the 24.5. I say that NC State wins by at least 25. I think they win the second half by a point. You on board, Eddie?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Eddie, look at my credentials. I'm 1-0 today. What could go wrong?
1-1.
We'll get into this a little bit more next hour, but the lack of upsets in the NCAA tournament. If you look at the Sweet 16, it's all teams from power conferences. We've got 7 SEC teams. We've got 4 teams from the Big 10, 4 from the Big 12, and 1 team from the ACC, which is Duke. We got no mid-majors. Nothing. We got nothing over here. Are you upset over that? And listen, the impact of NIL. It's a great example is Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf is with Michigan. He played for Yale last year, the Yale team that beat Auburn. So that's a mid-major guy that's playing in a power conference now. Like, the power of NIL is there. And listen, it's the first real year of that, right, Eddie? Am I wrong about that? Was the previous tournament involved in this, or is it's really ramping up this year?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at last year, because I think last year was kind of like the start of it, and then I think it's become more prevalent this year.
Yeah. I think that this is going to be more of the norm than not, but I think it's an overreaction to think this is all it's going to be. Like the death of the mid-majors reaching the Sweet 16. I don't think it goes quite that far. But anybody who's all for Cinderella, it's going to be a tougher road with NIL. There's no doubt about that.
Oakland last year, they had Jack Golke. I mean, they have to just play a different style of basketball that these Power 4 or Power 5 schools haven't seen.
Golke was lighting it up. My gosh, how fun was that, man? Just raining threes. Okay, top of the hour, Mike Chappell. We'll talk some Colts. We'll talk some tournament. We might talk, who knows what we're going to talk about, It might be Sammy versus David Lee. I don't know. I don't know what the next thing out of my mouth. Maybe we'll be betting live games, women's college basketball. I'm not sure. But a lot to do with Mike. That's coming up next. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. In for Jake here on The Fan. Pleased to welcome in Mike Chappell, CBS 4, Fox 59. You know, we haven't talked a ton of music when I filled in over here, Mike. You know, like give me your top 3. You know, musicians, bands. Like, what are you big on?
Well, the Beatles are one, just because I grew up during that time, and I've got a picture of me walking Abbey Road, so, you know, my bucket list is complete. Then, I mean, I have like a cluster. You get past like 77 on, I'm dead. I don't know people, but the Melancholics, Bryan Adams, Genesis.
Yeah.
People like Billy Joel, Bob Seger. So, you know, I'm pretty a plain guy that I stay in my own lane and enjoy it.
That's good stuff right there. No doubt about that. You got a picture on Abbey Road, huh? That's awesome.
Oh, we were there when the Colts played the Jags, whatever it was, 16 or 17 in London. And the wife and I went over there one morning, and she's got a picture of me walking on Abbey Road where the Beatles walked. So I'm one of those stupid tourists that mess up the locals for like 10 minutes, but so what? They don't ever see me again, so I'm fine.
Absolutely. Okay, so I've seen you've been tweeting a little bit about the NCAA tournament here. So just in general, what have you thought so far? We don't have any mid-majors in the Sweet 16. Been very chalky, but as far as that, just your general observation of the tournament so far, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm one of those that I don't follow a ton of college. I mean, focus on it heavy during the season. I'm sort of that tournament fan. And from everything you hear, this NIL is really directing all the major players from mid-majors to the majors, the power conferences, which is where everything seems to be headed. Football, basketball. It's going to be Big Ten, SEC, and then a few others, which is, if that's what we want, fine. I do miss the occasional. When I was still at the Star and the Final Four was here, I was assigned, I think it was the East Regional, whatever it was, and I latched on to George Mason on their run to Indy. They had a kid from Brebeuf. I can't remember his name. He was like their 6th or 7th player from Brebeuf. But I went to wherever George Mason is located, something in Virginia, and I can't remember the name because I'm old. But it was sort of cool. It's just cool to see those mid-majors. Butler back when they were a mid-major. To make the upset, those are probably going to be gone, probably, which is, I guess it's okay. I don't know. I'm still from the old school of Indiana high school basketball where it was one class, which I thought was cool. It really worked. But I enjoy it. I fill out the bracket like everybody else. My son and grandsons who were like 10 and 12, my grandson the first day missed 2. I missed like 6. And he doesn't know squat. So it reminded me of the great SNL skit of Peyton Manning and Amy Poehler where was he Pete Trimble? And she just smoked him. But it's cool. I just think the interest it draws is incredible. It's great when it's here. Some of my great memories when I was at the Anderson newspaper, the Daily Bulletin, back in from 74 to 84, 2 of my greatest memories is Madison Heights High School. Phil Buck always used to funnel his good players to Indiana. So I've still got on my keychain a key thing from the 76 Final Four with Bobby Wilkerson. And then I covered the 81 tournament with Ray Tolbert. So I've had some really great memories, Final Four. It's just a great time. And I have no dogs in the fight at all. I had St. John's going to the final game, so my bracket's pretty well trash. I got 14 of 16 of the Sweet 16, but when you lose a team in the final 2, you're toast. But I think it's cool. I follow it, but it's it's must-see TV, and it's changed, but I'm okay with it.
It's always great for the ego when someone who doesn't follow college basketball is smoking your bracket. You know, that's always awesome. But it happens.
Oh, no.
You know, it definitely happens. We were kicking this around, too. I was watching the IU women yesterday, and they were playing on the road against South Carolina. The first two rounds are on the road. They're in home arenas. Would you rather see the NCAA tournament on the men's side stay the way it is, where they're all neutral site games, or would you like to see the first two rounds be at home arenas where the atmosphere is way better, like the women's side? What do you think about that?
I don't like the women's side. I think that they initially, I don't know what the word initially is, but they did that on home court to the top seeds to draw attendance. I really do. But I think they've outgrown that. I just think to have all the top seeds, Notre Dame, for crying out loud, playing in South Bend, Kentucky playing at home, that's just such a huge, huge advantage. I understand why they did it initially they were trying to make sure that the early games had strong attendance. I would hope that women's basketball has grown past that stage. I just think it's crazy to give, the number one team, and there's still disparity in women's basketball. You still got teams where it's 86-30. You're going to have that, I guess. But I would like to think women's basketball has advanced to where you can put South Carolina and, I don't know, Atlanta, somewhere else, and draw good attendance. They're already advantaged because they're the better teams. Home court's a bit much for me.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. I hear you. Last one from the tournament, because I love this. You were quote tweeting former Colts receiver Brandon Stokely. So Stoke just wrote unbelievable. And your follow-up, Mike, was unintentional shot to the onions because guy was all over him. So you're obviously talking about the BYU-Wisconsin game. So at the end of the game, BYU has the ball. Wisconsin's trying to steal the ball. There's no space. The BYU guy moves around a little bit. Unintentional elbow to the man region of Klesmet there for Wisconsin. The BYU guy gets ejected. There was, Mike, nothing malicious, nothing intentional. It's basketball. It was unfortunate. We're kicking guys out for that? What are we doing?
I thought the official, it was called a flagrant 2, and I thought he used the word intentional. Now, maybe if it's a flagrant 2, it's got to be intentional, but that wasn't intentional. Again, the guy, he was being double-teamed in a trap, and the guy's right in his space, which he needs to be, and he got elbowed. I just think that's if you want to make it flagrant 1, okay, I guess. But to kick a guy out, I mean, it's, with football, we got the targeting thing in colleges, which is sort of some strange times where guys get thrown out. But to throw a guy out I didn't see anything intentional in that at all. I really didn't. So, that was such an important time of the game. I didn't agree with it, but. And again, can they please find a way on these reviews inside the last 30 seconds to where it's not 3 minutes long? Those are important calls, but come on.
Yeah, so long. Yeah, I've heard Gene Steratore say, "Can we expedite this process?" At least 5 times, and he's totally right. It takes way too long. All right, Mike. If we move to the Colts over here, Mike Chappell joining us, CBS 4, Fox 59. I saw a recent mock draft from Mel Kiper Jr., and he mocked the Colts taking Michigan tight end Colston Loveland. And he mentioned in his write-up, he was like, maybe a receiver. You look at Arizona's Tedorona McMillan, maybe Ohio State's Emeka Ibuka, Texas's Matthew Golden. If it's between those 4 players, if it's Loveland at Michigan or it's McMillan from Arizona, Ibuka, or Matthew Golden, who does the most for you from those 4 for the Colts to get?
Oh, tight end. I mean, they've got – you'd like to have a more explosive receiver. I mean, everybody wants Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or A.J. Brown. I like the Colts receiver room. Yes, I'd like for Michael Pittman to be a little bit more, but I think that's a good group. Reggie Wayne gets the most out of him. The tight end room is just bereft of talent, and I think that's been obvious the last couple of years. Last year more so. They had 39 catches as a group. The last time they had that few was in 1994. So you just can't hamstring your quarterback, whether it's Richardson or Daniel Jones without a tight end. You've got to have that. I did an updated mock draft. And when I say that, I mean I'm looking around at all the mock drafts, and the vast majority is either Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. A lot of mock drafts now have Tyler Warren going before the Colts. A couple of them still have a guard, Tyler Booker of Alabama, and the reason is, well, he'd give the Colts one of the best guard tandems in the NFL. Whoopee. That you can't do that. So I just think tight end is such a crying need, and I've always contended that if they really are high on Tyler Warren, and we don't know how the Colts rank these players. We don't. If they really believe that Warren is that good, that much higher than Colston, then you trade up and get him whatever, move to 6 or 7, whatever. The earliest I've seen Warren go, I think somebody had him going 6, or 5 or 6 to the Jets, I think it is. So, they missed out on Brock Bowers last year by a couple of picks. I just think tight end is such a desperate need that to take a guard, to take, they took care of corner, they took care of safety. I just think the one thing they haven't done, and what free agency lets them do, is focus on tight end. I don't see those receivers being that much more than what the Colts have gotten. You've got a lot of draft capital and youth in that room already, and you're hoping that A.D. Mitchell takes a great step. So tight end it's a complicated process, personnel and all that, but this is not complicated. They need a tight end. There are 2 pretty good ones, maybe 3 in the draft. You've got to come out of the draft with a tight end in the first round.
Without knowing specifically who Anthony Richardson's going to be surrounded by, right? We haven't had the draft yet, but just sort of guesstimating, what do you think we see from A. Rich in year 3? Is this like a Will Levis type situation with the Titans where this is the year he starts to get phased out? What do you think we're in store for with Anthony Richardson?
Well, we'll find out. It's got to be that I guess that the light came on and is going into his 3rd season, which to me means that this off season this is the first chance he's had to really work on his craft, footwork, throwing technique, and get the completion percentage up to, I'd take 58, 59%. I'm not looking at 65, but better completion percentage, better awareness, I guess. The deep ball's there. It's always going to be there, but he's got to be better with the intermediate game. He's got to be. And I don't think this can be incremental improvement to where, boy, next year, 2026, we really think he can be. He needs to be that now. He needs to show that definitively he is your future. Because next off season you got to exercise his 5th-year option, or not. So you've got to know he's got to make that jump. Injuries have been an issue. They have been. They've kept him from working on what he needs to work on. But those excuses and the fact he's young and 13 or 15 starts, I guess, whatever it is, those are no longer excuses. And he's got to come out and really seize the position. I sort of think that he was your 4th pick. That's who you took. So he has to be able to beat out Daniel Jones, or you missed on the pick. So I think we'll know they need to know. And if it's not him, as I've said a lot, if it's not Richardson, the whole franchise is set back 2 or 3 more years, because then you've got to find your guy. And if it's not, if you're not lucky enough to be bad enough to be in position to get a guy at the top of next year's draft, which this team is too good to be 3-14. I don't care how bad the quarterback play is. There's too much talent. So they're not going to be in position to get a top guy, if there is a top guy next year. And then what are you doing the veteran quarterback thing again? Well, that didn't work out. So much is riding on Richardson emerging as that guy with this full off season behind him. I hope he does. I'm skeptical, but I've been wrong before. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope he's the guy, because the alternative is not very good.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Mike, I've got an idea. I think it's good, but I think you're going to hate it, okay? So you're a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame Selection Committee. My idea is I would love, as a football fan, we'll maybe do like a Hard Knock style where you see the deliberations. Like you hear the arguments for a player, against a player getting into the Hall of Fame. I would love if they filmed that and then just condensed it down to like a digestible 30 minutes, an hour-long thing. Now, the downside for guys like you would have your arguments against players publicized, which I know you would not want. You don't want, like, no, I don't think Charles Haley should be in the Hall of Fame, and then crazy Charles Haley hears this, and now you're a target. You know what I mean? Like, I get that you guys wouldn't want it, but as a football fan, I would love that. What do you think about maybe like a Hard Knock style or some type of documentary with the deliberations, and you actually get to hear it as a football fan?
I think it's a great idea, and it will never happen, ever. I've got a better chance of playing tight end for the Colts next year than that ever happening. We're sworn to secrecy with a lot of things, and one of the big parts is we're not allowed to go into detail about what the discussions were, which allows the selectors to be really critical on guys without fear of what you said of teams or players coming back and really maybe holding that against you. Because there's been some times we've had really, really heated discussions. Eli Manning this past February was very, very divisive. Terrell Owens a couple of years ago was very, very controversial with things that were said. It would be great TV. It would be great. It would be a great 30-30 or Hard Knocks. But then you would see the dialogue really toned down for a lot of reasons. But I think there's parts of the process I don't agree with. I don't agree with the way they changed, cutting it from 15 to 10 to 7 to 5, because adding 7 to cut to 7, it's going to make it really, really hard to get more than 3 guys in, which is going to make it really, really, really hard for a Reggie Wayne to get in. It really is, or a Torrey Holt. But confidentiality is a big cornerstone of it, and I understand that on a lot of levels. Great idea. With 0.0 team. You've got Blutarski's grade point average of a chance of getting in.
Oh man, that's perfect. No, I totally get it, Mike. I absolutely understand everything you're saying, but yeah, that's good stuff. Well, hey, Mike, always appreciate you popping on. Always good to catch up with you, man. And hey, man, maybe listen to some Mellencamp or some Beatles today after the initial discussion. What do you think?
I've got it on my car, so when I'm driving around, that's what I got. Beatles channel. Love it.
There you go, man. All right, we'll catch you soon, Mike. You have a good day, bud.
Be well.
You too. There he is, Mike Chappell, CBS 4, Fox 59. Man, I would love – I bet you would too, Eddie. Wouldn't you love to hear – the arguments for or against a potential Hall of Famer Oh, my gosh. Like he just said, can you imagine hearing the arguments against Terrell Owens? And what that would lead to, like it would fuel these talk shows. Oh, that would be gold for me. As a sports radio host and a diehard football fan, I would love to hear that. But I totally understand where that's confidential, man. You can't. Like, imagine those arguments if they were filming.
Yeah.
This is the first season. Like, we're filming for the Hall of Fame. All right, guys, we're rolling here. All right, Mike, what do you think? Yay or nay for Eli Manning? Everybody would just be like, I'm going to say yes. I think he should be it.
What if they had like
so
those voice
sanitized.
encryptors and like came up with different names? It's like, oh, this is
There you go.
Steve Johnson, and it's like, I'm Steve Johnson, and it just
There
doesn't
it
even
is.
sound like anything
Yes.
like Steve Johnson.
That's what we would have to do. That's a great idea, Eddie. Yes, we black out everybody, right? They're just in the shadows, and their voices are, I don't think Terrell Owens should be in the Hall of Fame. And you're not like, I know that's Mike Chappell right there, but you can hear the arguments. Yes, I'll take it. I'll take anything at this point just to get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. Okay, we got a lot to react to. There's a lot of meat on that bone. Okay, we've got I've got a couple of music observations. Eddie, I have to make a statement here that at least half the listening audience is going to completely disagree with and possibly never want me back again. Okay? It's that scathing of a statement. But it's something I truly believe. I'll lay it out for you. Also, the NIL stuff. There was something that when Mike was talking about the NIL impact, it made me think of something. I want to throw it your way. Impacts college football, college basketball, all that good stuff. So we'll react to all that stuff coming up next. By the way, Eddie, I hope you took my women's basketball betting advice, because as I look right now, we got NC State, third quarter alone, up by 9 points.
They're doubling up Michigan State.
I hope. That's right. I hope that you took my sage advice, Eddie. I watched the IU women yesterday, okay? I feel like I'm in tune completely with all betting angles with the women's basketball over here, And it looks like we're going to be 2-0 so far. So, hey, our resume speaks for itself, right? All right, we'll react to all that good stuff coming up next. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I'm Brian Nolan for Jake here on The Fan. Hey, let me guess. This is Sammy talking about love.
Yeah, this one is Why Can't This Be Love? Yeah.
Wow, that's weird because Sammy, I'd swear he never sings about love.
Well,
is this like the only song?
I just played I Can't Drive 55 2 segments ago. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that wasn't even Van Halen. That's just Sammy.
I know.
But there was a mandate from Van Halen. You will only sing about love, Sammy. Are you in or out? And he's like, in, I guess. That'd be funny if that's how it really went down. I'll give you my musical thought in a second here, Eddie. And that is my scathing opinion here. But a couple of things. First off, a couple of things that Mike was talking about that I found interesting. He threw this in there. These long reviews at the end of college basketball games. Eddie, we're not reinventing the wheel over here. This has been talked about quite a bit. This is not like groundbreaking stuff. But it drives me crazy where they've been talking about it on these games. I think Stan Van Gundy was one of them. Some of the other analysts, they're like, we got to do it like the NBA. You've got to have a challenge system where you get a challenge. If you're right, you get another one. That's it. If you're wrong, no more challenges. It's over. But you can't just keep reviewing things over and over and over again and taking a long time while doing it. It's like, I don't have a problem with it if it's quick, but it's not quick at all. I love tennis. The tennis reviews are the best, where it's like, hey, Djokovic thought that shot was in. Let's see. And, barely out. On with life. Done. Like, almost instantaneous. That's not the way it is in college basketball. I'm watching that Oregon-Arizona game yesterday. There was clearly, the ball was off of Biddle, the Oregon big man. Nate Biddle hits the ball out of bounds. And the officials are like, let's just check to make sure. It should have taken them 1, maybe 2 reviews. And they're like, oh, it's Arizona's ball. On with life. Instead, I don't know what they're looking at. The commentators are like, are they looking at the time on the clock? What are they doing over here? Are they x-raying John in the 5th row who's got a knee issue? What are they doing? It was ridiculous. Why does it take this long? But you got to have, if you're going to take that long, it's got to be a challenge system like the NBA. You just can't keep reviewing things over and over. If you're taking that long, it kills the flow of the game.
I agree with you, and I think in the NBA, I think the complaint was a little bit different than in college. In the NBA, it was a complaint of the number of reviews. In college, it's the speed in which these reviews are happening. So the question to you is, like, even if they go to a challenge system, what's stopping them from taking so long on these challenges to get to the end result? Because I think the end result and how long it takes to get there is the bigger issue than the number of challenges, like it was in the NBA a handful of years ago before they went to the challenge system.
Well, I'll meet you halfway, because you're right. If, let's say, okay, you get a challenge. If you're right, you get another challenge. So we've got, a max of 4 challenges. If all those happen at the end of the game and they take 5 minutes apiece on all of those or somewhere in that area, yeah, it's still taking way too long, and you might not have helped things at all. It might be a complete wash. So, yeah, I think, one, the challenge system makes sense if it takes so long, because at least you're limiting it to, we're having no more than a maximum of 4 challenges. There are games where they review stuff over and over and over and over and over. I would love to know the NCAA tournament game this year that had the most reviews in it, especially at the end of the game, because it's got to be more than 4. Just has to be. They review everything. But I also think you're right. Like, even if there is a challenge system, you got to speed it up, man. Like, I've seen Sterator and heard him say, can we expedite this process? Can we not take a day and a half, guys? Like, what are we doing over here? When Sterator knows what it's like, he's been an official. He's been there. He knows the dynamics. And he's the one saying, why is this taking so long? That's not Bob in, the 300 level saying, why is it taking so freaking long? That's Sterator knowing everything and still saying that. So they got to speed it up. The other thing here about NIL and the impact on mid-major upsets, becoming less and less frequent. I was thinking about this too, Eddie, is, okay, let's say you're in college, and we'll take Yale, for instance, right? Danny Wolf went from Yale to Michigan. If you're the next guy on Yale's roster that's offered a bag to go to a power conference when Danny Wolf just left, right? Like, it makes it even harder to stay at Yale or whatever mid-major it happens to be if your teammate, who's freaking nice, just got a bag to go somewhere else, and now you're offered a bag. Like, that's just the way it's going to go. And that's the new landscape of college sports. And I think of a guy, this popped into my head in college football, Quinyon Mitchell. So he got drafted by the Eagles. He was a rookie defensive back with the Eagles last year. He was offered a lot of money to go from Toledo to a power conference, and he stayed at Toledo. But I think it's a lot harder in basketball to do that when you don't have that many players. And so if your teammates who are good, if they're going elsewhere, why are you staying? Like, what's the incentive? Like, hey, I could not make money to stay here and have a way worse chance to win games. Like, why are you staying there? So I think it impacts basketball even more as far as that next guy staying when your teammate just got a deal to go somewhere else. So, yeah, that's what we're looking at, Eddie. And I think the upsets are going to be harder to come by. I don't think they're extinct. I think it's an overreaction to say they're just gone. But they're going to be harder to come by. What about you? Are you a Cinderella guy? You like the big upsets?
I do. I think it's good for the sport. I think it creates big stories. Like, for example, Butler a handful of years ago with Gordon Hayward and Shelvin Mack and Ronald Norred and Matt Howard and all those guys. Like, in today's college basketball, they're probably not there after that first NCAA tournament run where they make it to the NCAA championship game. Like, they're not there in 2010 when they try to go back-to-back and they fall short against Duke because of NIL and the transfer portal and all these SEC, Big 10, Big 12, you name it, Big East coaches. They're calling up all these players and like, hey, I'll pay you $750,000 to leave Butler to come here and play. And you'll be on a national stage. You'll be able to be on national television for almost all of your games. You'll be able to get all the exposure. We'll be able to help you get to the NBA. But that wouldn't have happened in 2010 because they didn't have NIL at the time. So that was able to happen for Butler. They were able to have those two Cinderella teams. And now you can look back on them like, man, that was a heck of a time to be a Butler Bulldog fan, or just from the city of Indianapolis itself, because the city kind of rallied behind those guys. And if you have with NIL, you're not going to have as many of these opportunities. So that's why I'm Team Cinderella, and, having some like Oakland last year make a deep run. Like, I'm all for those type of things because they're great stories and you get to learn more about the coach. Like Greg Campy, for example, at Oakland. He's been there now for 42 years and he hasn't left, and he loses two of his big players, one to graduation and Jack Golke, and then Townsend, he is at, I think he's at Arizona right now, and he's playing in the Sweet 16.
Yeah. It's one of those... It's like it's an unintended consequence, where I think the players should get paid. Like, the way I've looked at this, they should at least be able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness. They're not even getting a cut of the money. Think about college football and the NCAA tournament, the money that is generated, and they don't get a piece of that. They're not touching that. They're just – I always look at it like this. Eddie, you're a big music guy. It'd be like if you and I had a band, and Eddie, this is a powerful band. People love our band, okay? And we go over to Lucas Oil, and we sell the place out. And we don't make a nickel off of that. It's this entity called the NCAA that takes all of the profits we just generated. The least we can do is sell some T-shirts and some CDs or whatever it is to make a buck. That's the least we should be able to do. Mm-hmm. And so I'm all for NIL. But that's an unintended consequence where it makes life so much more difficult for the mid-majors that don't have the deep pockets of these power conference schools. They just, how do you say, like, but come on, like, I thought you were fond of Cornell, right? Like, we don't have money, but... Come on, right? Didn't your sister come here? How are you going to leave? What's your sales pitch against a bag of money? You don't have one.
No.
And so that's the way it's changing, man. That's where it is.
I just had an idea, too, when we were talking about the college basketball reviews and them taking so long. Like, the other aspect of it, too, that is a reason why it takes so long is they don't really have a replay center like they do in the NBA or like even in college football. I know college football, each conference has like their own kind of quote-unquote replay center to help expedite the process, but I don't know if they have that in the college hoops landscape of things.
Well, that's the thing, Eddie, is a bare minimum is you have that for the NCAA tournament. You know, I understand we have well over 300 schools in college basketball. I mean, like some of these like lower tiered conferences, you're not going to have like the Secaucus of college basketball, right? For the MEAC or whatever it happens to be. But a bare minimum is you got to have that for the NCAA tournament. We always talk about the NCAA tournament is a TV show. You've got to have, we just talked about all the money the tournament generates. Look, the TV contract is through the freaking roof. And we don't have like a centralized Secaucus or something where they're ahead of it. Okay, who's the ball off of? We're on it. Okay, it's off of Biddle. It's Arizona's ball. On with life.
Yeah.
Like, that's got to be a bare minimum. You got to have it for the NCAA tournament. You might not have it for the entire regular season. You got to have it for the tournament.
How about McNeese making $5 million off of their just one win in the NCAA tournament?
That's pretty good.
Because of all their exposure, and then I forget, Ari, is that his name? Aura or whatever they call him?
The manager that's got an NIL deal?
Yeah, that had over 6 figures in NIL money coming in because of all the exposure he got.
You know, I heard that he parlayed all that NIL money and he put it on North Carolina State today and laid the 24 and a half at halftime. And he's looking pretty good right now, Eddie. That's the story I heard, is our guy over there.
That's an investment
NIL.
for him, all right.
That's right. That's very smart. All right, we'll get to my scathing music thought. And then also, we got 2 very different seasons for this guy. So who is he going forward? Ball is on the brain. We'll get into some football right around the corner. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Brian Nolan for Jake here on The Fan. All right, Eddie, so I've got a music thought that involves sports as well, okay? This is one of the most misunderstood words in sports and also life, I would say. Completely misunderstood. You know what the word is, Eddie? Overrated. Okay? That's the word.
So are you saying the word overrated is overrated at the same time?
I'm not saying it's overrated. I'm saying it's misunderstood. That's what I'm saying. Because people think you're saying this sucks when you're just saying, no. People think this is the greatest thing ever, and it's not quite that, right? That's what overrated really means. And so, first off, the music thought, and I'll work some sports into this as well, but the music thought is, and I hope that Mike Chappell is listening to the Beatles channel right now, because I don't want to make him mad or anything, but he's a big Beatles fan. A lot of people are. Fine. It's great. Whatever works for you, no problem. The Beatles are the most overrated band in the history of music. Now, Eddie, that doesn't mean I say they're bad. They're not any good. They've got some fantastic songs, a lot of talent, all that. Some great songwriting ability. But the obsession that people have with the Beatles, it's just like, it's good. I just don't understand this level of fanaticism. I just don't understand it. So that's the thing is I'm not saying that they're bad at all. They've written some tremendous music. I just don't get. I would say it's like Star Wars. I might be ticking off another section of people over here. Star Wars is great. It's fantastic. It's tremendous theater, entertainment value, the writing ability, all of that good stuff. You might love Star Wars. I get it. The level that people take it to, where you're like going to a convention dressed as a Wookiee, I'm like, wow, these are good movies. They're great, but I just don't understand this level of just, this is the most amazing thing ever. I'm like, no, overrated. What do you think of those two thoughts before I go any further here, Eddie?
I mean, I didn't grow up listening to the Beatles, so I can't contribute in that category. I got ridiculed by the namesake Jake Query for not knowing the song Hey Jude.
Oh, wow. Eddie, what's going on? You didn't know that song?
I didn't grow up listening to the Beatles, so I really didn't know many Beatles songs. And so after that moment, when he mentioned it, we played Beatles music the rest of the day, and he was like, Eddie, you know this one? And most of the time I was like, no, because I just didn't grow up listening to it.
Wow, Eddie, that's amazing right there. Wow. Yeah, but I mean, listen, people love it. It's fine. But Hey Jude is a great song, like a great example. It's a good song. People act like it's, oh my gosh, this should be in the Smithsonian of music over here. It's good. It's not just breathtaking. Like, oh my gosh, this is just poetry in music notes. Like, I don't know. They take it too far. I'll tell you something else that's obnoxious. Again, you have to start with, if you're talking about overrated, underrated, you have to start with the most, like, the average opinion. What's the average opinion of the Beatles? Oh my gosh, legendary. Oh, overrated. What's the mainstream opinion of a band like Nickelback? Oh, they're the worst. They're awful. They're dreadful. Eddie, again, by no means am I telling you Nickelback is awesome or fantastic or even good. I'm not telling you those things. I'm telling you they're underrated because the average opinion is so much lower than their actual music is. So, yeah, the overrated, underrated thing trips people up like crazy. I'll give you a sports example. Lamar Jackson is the most overrated player in the NFL. A few reasons why. Again, let's start off. Let's not get anything twisted. I'm not telling you he's bad. He's not. He is fantastic in the regular season. The problem is the playoffs, he wets himself. But there's no argument to be made that he's not a good NFL quarterback. You look at his numbers last year, he threw 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. 41 touchdown passes, 4 picks. He rushed for over 900 yards. So collectively, throwing it, running it, he gave you over 5,000 yards, 45 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. That is unbelievable production. You can't say he's not a good quarterback. Of course he's a good quarterback. He's a highlight reel. But he's overrated because he wets himself come playoff time when it matters most, time and time and time again. So, don't think overrated is automatically bad. It's just a way of saying this band, this player, this whatever isn't what the masses are saying it is. It's a little bit less than that. Maybe it's far less than that, but it's at least less than what the people are raving about and saying that it is. Does that make sense to you at all? Even if you don't agree with those examples, but at least the overrated, underrated thing, that's got to make sense to you, Eddie, right?
It does. Let me add a name to the overrated category while we're at it. I'll go in the NBA circles here. Damian Lillard.
Ooh. Interesting example. Now, full disclosure, Eddie, I worked in Portland for 3 years. I love Damian Lillard. It's my guy. But let's start it off with, what's the mainstream opinion of Damian Lillard? It's you rarely hear anyone say anything negative about the guy.
Correct.
Is fantastic. What a leader. There are a lot of things that are true. But if you look at him with the Bucks right now, and we thought this was going to be a seismic deal and make a big impact, and here they come, man, they're going to challenge for a title. They're not even close. They're not. So, yeah, I really don't have a problem with that. Dame at his peak, he was a true NBA superstar. He's hitting a 37-foot step back on Paul George to ice a series against the Thunder. It's insane, some of the stuff that he was doing, but he was doing it in Portland. A lot of people aren't staying up late to watch those things. But right now, yeah, absolutely, I could get behind that. Because, again, you have to start with the mainstream opinion and then assess, does the guy live up to that opinion or not? So, yeah, see, Eddie, you get it. Very wise man, Eddie.
Thank you.
Very wise.
I'm going to put that as a testimonial on my resume.
There you go. Eddie Van Garrison right there. Bullet points, very wise man. And then everything else from there, All right, let's talk some Purdue hoops. We'll get to the football thoughts next hour. But Purdue is on the brain. Sam King. We're breaking down Purdue, Houston. I want to do a little side-by-side. Eddie, I don't want to fully admit that I was dead wrong, but I might come really close to admitting I was dead wrong, football-wise. That's in the next hour as well. So a little hoops ball mixture. Keep it locked right here. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Jake Query here on The Fan. Like to welcome in Sam King, Purdue reporter for the Lafayette Journal and Courier. Welcome in here, Sam. Good afternoon to you. First off, what do you think about the anthem of the men's tournament this year? A little abracadabra from Lady Gaga. I'm on board. I don't mind it at all, but they play it all the freaking time. Are you on board with it, or are you starting to get tired of it here, Sam?
I think it's, trying to introduce different genre of fans. Maybe this time of year we have more eyeballs. I have no complaints about it whatsoever.
Okay, all right. So you're on board. It's okay. I'll put up with it. That type of thing. It's all right. The CBS suits, they'll give you a thumbs up for that. I like that. Okay, so if you look forward to this matchup against Houston, Sam, if I could say, all right, you can wave the magic wand and Purdue can do a really good job in this one area, right? Maybe it's limiting turnovers. Maybe it's offensive rebounding, whatever. If you pick one specific category, what do you think would put Purdue in a good spot to potentially win this game?
I think you just touched on it. It's eliminating turnovers. And I say this after a game where Purdue just had 19 turnovers and one running away from McNeese. But I think that is kind of the magic formula. It has been for years. Is if Purdue can stay in single-digit turnovers, maybe around that 7 mark or fewer, it typically wins the game. Now there's, a few instances, Wisconsin this year, I think being one maybe, where that's not the case. But in those situations, Purdue gives itself the best chance to win because it just gets shocked. And it's such an efficient offensive team, mostly, that you're going to be able to win games when you do that and get your required number of shots up, especially against the Houston team, which, if you take away the last game where it really just had to outscore Gonzaga to win the game, like to play in the, try to win a rock fight in the 50s.
What would you say, Sam, is the biggest concern when you take on a Houston team? We all know their defensive credentials. They can attack the rim, too. Purdue doesn't do a great job defending the rim. When you think about all the strengths of Houston, any of the weaknesses of Purdue, what's the one specific thing that worries you the most in this matchup?
I've often this year felt like Purdue had to have not just a second ball handler, but a third ball handler because of a situation like this where teams are just going to not let Braden Smith control things. And Purdue's been so reliant on Braden having the ball in his hands to make things operate. And you'll see, even when he gets in trouble, he passes the ball and then gets it right back and resets the offense or whatever. But you're going to have to rely on Jakari Harris, C.J. Cox, Fletcher Lawyer, even Miles Colvin a little bit probably against a team like this. And that was a promising sign that I saw against McNeese State. There was a stretch there where Purdue was getting pressed and put Miles Colvin at the 4, but he wasn't really playing, a power forward position. He was really just another guy who could handle the ball and help you get it across midcourt. Purdue went with Miles Colvin, Jakari Harris, P.J. Cox, and Braden Smith. And talking to those guys after the game, I said, "Had you ever run with that lineup before?" And they were all like, "Nope, that was something where McNeese did something we weren't ready for or hadn't seen, and so we had to do something they hadn't seen, and it just happened to work." So kudos to Matt Painter and his staff for adapting there, and P.J. Thompson, who has had his hand in the offense, for making that work. But you're going to have to rely on a lot of guys to beat Houston. I think it's going to take 9 or 10 guys contributing to have a chance to win this game.
No, that's a good point there, Sam. What do you think? Do you think that Houston's going to blitz Braden Smith quite a bit, get the ball out of his hands, and force somebody else to initiate the offense?
I kind of think you have to. Kelvin, and what he's done is kind of it reminds me a little bit of the old school Gene Cady days at Purdue, where it was like we have just a bunch of no superstar player that's just going to take over a game every time, that can really just harass you and force you into a style you don't want to play and beat you with toughness and grit and really good defense. And that's not going to stray away from that against Purdue. I think Braden Smith is going to have his moments because he's just that good, but you're going to have to make other guys beat you. And that's why, hopefully this week I'll write about it, but I think Trey Kaufman-Renn becomes so important, not because he scores 20 points a game, but because we saw in the last game, he can be a really good decision maker when he gets the ball inside and get it back out and get somebody else a great shot. And because of what he's done this year, teams are going to collapse on him or double him, whatever it might be. I think at this point of the season.
He's Sam King from the Lafayette Journal and Courier joining us here on The Fan. This might sound like a stupid question at first. And when I'm done with the question, you still might say it's a stupid question, Sam, which is fine. But I was just thinking about which is the bigger concern for Purdue? Is it going up against their defense? And we all know Houston's defensive credentials. Or is it Purdue going against Houston's offense, right? Like Houston's offense is a lot better than it's been the last couple of seasons. They're pretty good this season. And Purdue, with where they are defensively, like which is the bigger concern for you? Is it facing Houston's offense or their defense in this particular matchup?
Yeah, L.J. Cryer is going to be an issue. He's an issue for anybody, but especially with Purdue and what it's struggled with. But the good thing is the Boilermakers get, 6 days to prepare for that. And I thought that Purdue really did a good job where I thought that was a situation to frown upon going into that McNeese game was just their ability maybe to get some easy shots. And Purdue took away the entire paint and made that team settle for jump shots, and it wasn't a good jump shooting team. So maybe that's a promising sign, but Houston is clearly a far better team than McNeese State, respectfully. Nothing to take away from that team, which had a fantastic year. But now you're talking about a team that's probably one of 3 or 4 that people think can win a national championship. So that is concerning, but I think that Purdue will probably spend quite a bit of time trying to adapt to that if it wasn't already kind of pre-planning for a possible Sweet 16 game against Houston before last week.
Yeah. But, hey, Matt Painter caught the Frisbee, right? So they should be good because Danny Hurley did that, right? So it should be all right for Purdue. Isn't that how it works, Sam?
Well, if Matt Painter wins a national championship, every coach will be begging for a Frisbee toss and posting
That's right.
moving forward. So.
That's absolutely right, man. Can you imagine that? Oh, that's funny stuff for sure. How do you think Kaufman-Wren is going to fare in this game against Houston? Because he absolutely ate on the glass. He scored 22 points and 15 rebounds. But McNeese is very undersized. That's not the case with Houston. If you had to ballpark the points and rebounds for Kaufman-Wren, what do you think he might be around against Houston?
Well, so he had some really strange statistical games especially when you think of what Purdue centers have done in the past with Zach Edey and Caleb Swanigan and people of that kind of build that are just rebounding monsters. Trey Kaufman-Wren would have games where he had like 3 or 4 rebounds, and you're thinking, gosh, Purdue isn't going to win games when its center is only giving you that on the boards. And then here down the last 6 or 7 games, he's been a different player. I don't think he's had less than 7 rebounds during this recent stretch, and he's averaging something around 9+ a game. And then, as you said, a career high 15 just the other day. I think he's really turned a corner in that regard, and that's something that in the regular season finale against Illinois, he really said, hey, I think we've figured this rebounding thing out. Purdue's become a much better rebounding team that is going to benefit us in the tournament. And now, you kind of take that with a grain of salt until you see it play out. And, Purdue's probably fortunate to play High Point and then not have to play Clemson in the second round, and you get a kind of favorable size advantage there. But McNeese was a pretty good rebounding team for what it was. Now you got to kind of take it up another level to compete with Houston on the boards.
We were talking about the NIL impact on mid-May and a lot of programs and all that good stuff. But if you think about Purdue, obviously not a mid-major, they're in a power conference, but there are 11 players on the roster from Indiana? Like, what do you think about the job of Matt Painter keeping the main guys at Purdue, like Braden Smith not going elsewhere, like all these guys staying at Purdue? What do you think about that job and how hard it is to do that in the current landscape with these teams willing to throw gobs of cash, bags of money at these players for Purdue to have 11 dudes from Indiana stay on the roster? That's pretty impressive stuff right there.
It's amazing when you go in the locker room and you ask all of these players, whether it's walk-ons, guys like Will Berg who aren't playing all year long and then all of a sudden have a role in the tournament, or you're talking to Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Wren and Fletcher Lawyer. they always bring up the word culture, and sometimes people say that, but I really think that this program is kind of ingrained in what it is, and like just buying into a role, whatever your role is, do it to the best of your ability. And there doesn't seem to be any jealousy. Like this guy makes this much money and I only make this much, anything like that. It seems like everybody's just kind of in it together for the betterment of the program. And if your stats aren't there one night, so be it, as long as the other guy stepped up. And Caleb First was the guy who said it after the first round win over High Point. He had been starting for 2 months, and in that game he had 9 minutes while Cam Heide was out there recording the double-double, and he said, I was the happiest guy in the world for Cam Heide because he helped us win the game. And that came at the expense of Caleb First getting to play very much in that game. So I just think it's kind of what Matt Painter has done, kind of an old school style. He showed it still can work, building the culture, getting 4-year guys, not going into the portal and just trying to build a team on the fly. It's kind of on autopilot a bit right now, the way that things are operating. Now, will that come back and bite Purdue in the butt at some point? Possibly, but right now it seems to be working.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Really appreciate you popping on the show, Sam. Eddie, if you could give him some Lady Gaga on the way out, it's just it's a very nice, like, kind of like wave, like, hey, Sam, thanks for being on here today. And, really appreciate that. There we go. Right, Sam? The anthem of the men's tournament. Does that feel like a proper send-off for you right there?
Not for me personally, but I'll take it.
Okay, all right, fair enough, man. You have a good day, Sam. Really appreciate your time, bud.
All right, thanks, guys.
There he is. There's Sam King, Purdue reporter at the Lafayette Journal and Courier. We could just call it the Lafayette Colonel. We could just combine Journal and Courier. And what do you think, Eddie? Is that one of my better ideas? Or
it's not the first time that the Lafayette Journal and Courier has been butchered. The namesake Jake Corey has done it a time or two, so it's completely okay.
Okay.
Jake has these
Fair
mental
enough,
hurdles, man. You got Dustin Topurak with the Indianapolis Star, Zach Osterman with the Indianapolis Star. So there's a list of names and things that sometimes go through Jake's mind that he always has like a mental hurdle to get over,
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, first things first, let's get it on another women's college basketball play here, Eddie. We're looking at the first half. Points are tough to come by. We're going to go under 61.5. Lock it in. That's a live line right now. We've got Texas ahead of Illinois 10-9. All right, we're testing this theory out. We're 2-0 so far. I watched the IU women yesterday, and I'm like, it'd be a shame if I was an expert women's basketball bettor and it just wasn't firing away, So we're testing this theory out. Oh, that's another play for you, Eddie. You in on this? Under 61.5. Don't miss the move. I'm hot. I'm hot right now, 2-0. So we'll take an under here. We'll test it out. Okay, a couple of things here. First off, shout out to Matt Painter, Purdue moving on to the Sweet 16. But let's get to the dose of reality here. It's garbage that they're playing this game in Indianapolis. Right, Eddie? We're talking about Purdue is it is. Sorry. Purdue's a 4 seed. Houston is a 1 seed. And Houston has to play basically a road game? What the hell is that? What's your reward for being a much better team in the regular season? It's playing a road game in the Sweet 16? What are we doing?
I kind of highlighted
How is that
earlier.
The setup? With what?
Colorado State being the underdog to Memphis, who's the better team, but Memphis has to go play out in Seattle.
Right. Yeah, there you go. It's just weird. It's goofy how that go. I think the women have it right. I really do. I think home games, the first couple of rounds, you've earned that. I would be, this is a little bit radical, Eddie. Some people would push back on this. Especially in college football, I am all for home games all the way until the championship game. In college basketball, I would be all for home games until the Final Four. That's absolutely what I would sign up for. Why is Houston playing a road game in Indianapolis? Why? Because we're just playing neutral site games? That's what we've always done. That's what we're used to. It doesn't make sense. How is that their reward? That's a punishment for being a better regular season team. I just don't think that should be the way it's set up. And some people will push back, and I get it. You love the upsets. You love the Cinderella stories. That's going to be harder to come by if you're on the road. But there's no denying that if you have the better regular season resume, you should get the better postseason reward, which is, if not a home game in your arena, at least a game close to your home arena where it's the next best thing instead of playing what's essentially a road game. There are going to be 30,000 people at Lucas Oil. They're going to have the curtain, right? So it's not the full stadium, but they're going to have the curtain going on. So 30,000, but still, how many of those people do you think are going to be Houston fans compared to Purdue fans?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Houston's going to be completely outnumbered, Eddie. It's going to be like you see a game, I don't know, like the Rams are at home, and it's just nothing but Philadelphia Eagles fans, something like Chargers at home, with nothing but Chiefs fans. That's how it's going to be. It's going to be a ton of Purdue fans and some Houston fans.
Like it explains the flaw with it, because I mean, Florida is one of the top seeds, and they have to be on the West Coast because you've got Duke and Auburn. They're both East region teams.
I don't understand why we're not playing home games. I really don't. If you're looking for what makes college so special, college football, college basketball, it is the home atmospheres. That's what makes it special. And instead, on the men's side, all throughout the tournament, we're playing at neutral sites. We're playing like you're in Milwaukee, and you're like, cool, am I going to go to the Kentucky-Illinois game? Yeah, I guess, sure, why not? But if I'm not a fan of either team, am I just going to paint my face and go ballistic I'm just going to pick Illinois and be the biggest Illinois fan? No, you're not going to do that. So it directly impacts the atmosphere, the vibe, the whole thing. I'm all for home court advantage. If that's what you earn, that's what you should get. And I also think for anybody who pushes back on, well, we're not going to have as many upsets, we're not going to have as many road wins, that's true. But think about this. I'll take you to college football, Eddie. Remember the Rose Bowl, the beatdown where Ohio State just wrecked Oregon?
Yep.
You kind of went, like you had some duck money on that game.
Oh, no. There was no duck money. I was just saying, oh, yeah, I remember that. Just another blowout in college football playoffs.
Total beatdown. What if that game's at Autzen? What if it's at Oregon? Is Ohio State winning that way? You know what I mean? For anybody who's pushing back, we're not going to have road wins. We're not going to have Cinderella. Well, one, you don't know that. Two, it might make some neutral site blowout games more competitive. It can work in your favor. It's not only going to work in the opposite direction. It can work in your favor at times. So I'm all for it. I know some might look at it like, well, that's a radical idea, but look, man, I think it makes the regular season much more important, especially in college football. We're talking about a lot less games. College hoops, what, Eddie? We're in the 30s-ish regular season games. College football, we're talking 12 regular season games. If you get home field advantage, I think it should be just like the NFL. I do. I think it should be home field advantage all throughout the playoffs except for the Super Bowl. That's exactly what college football should do. It should be home field games except for the title game. Put it at the Rose Bowl every freaking year. That's what it should be.
Yeah, but what about all those other bowl games? Like you've got the Cotton Bowl and the Peach
Screw
the
the Cotton Bowl. Screw the Peach Bowl.
The Sugar Bowl.
Screw the whatever bowl. Yeah, screw them all. It doesn't help college football. Which is better? Forget about the ties to the Sugar Bowl, or we've had ties to the Orange and Fiesta Bowls for years. Who cares? Is it better that, I don't know, Alabama, just atmosphere, vibe, entertainment value, is it better that Alabama hosts, I don't know, Miami in a college football playoff game, or is it better that we put Alabama and Miami in the Fiesta Bowl in the middle of Arizona? What's better? Right. It's a no-brainer home field.
Right.
I would love to say. And you think about, Eddie, the importance of the regular season, especially in college football. Now that we're going to get even more teams, we're going to expand it to at least 14. We're getting more teams in there. You're starting to incrementally water down the importance of the regular season. what can help spruce that up is home field advantage. If you're vying for a 1 seed, a 2 seed, you're not coasting into the playoff at all. Like you're trying to win games. This makes the regular season even more important. I would love to see it. I would love to see the NFL model in college football, and forget about, we've had this relationship with the Poland Weed Eater Bowl forever. Who cares, dude? Give me home atmospheres all day long over neutral sites. Neutral sites are neutered atmospheres. That's what they are. And then on top of it, you get a situation where Purdue, who doesn't have the resume that Houston does, Purdue is essentially playing a home game. They didn't earn that. They did not earn that. And I'd be saying the same thing if it was in reverse. Like, it'd be a shame if, Purdue's a 1 seed, and they're taking on a Houston team who's a 4 seed, and they're going to play it in San Antonio. You know what I mean? Like, how is that a reward for Purdue exactly? It's not. It's a punishment. I just don't agree with it. Eddie, you're on board?
Look,
you want to know what the home court, home field initiative here?
I'm both ways. I see it both ways. I personally enjoy seeing the underdog story in sports, so I'm still fine with the neutral site games for college basketball. And then college football, you already get the 1 home game now. If you're not a team that gets a bye, right?
Oh, what's that with
if you're a team that doesn't get the bye? So, like, for example, Indiana played
like
Notre Dame, and that game was in South Bend.
South Bend. Yep. Yeah. I love the first round where it's at home stadiums. I wish it was home games throughout, except for the title game. And again, like, I get it. The upsets are going to be harder to come by. But when you do get those upsets, that's legendary stuff. Think about the NFL playoffs. Think about how many road wins come to mind. Right? Like, one of the first ones I think of is when Tom Coughlin's face was about to fall off. Remember when it was freezing cold at Lambeau? And the Giants won the game. That was the 2007 season. They went on to beat the undefeated Patriots. Like, these road wins are part of NFL lore, where you go in and you take them down. Like, that's the way it would be in the college football playoff, March Madness. If you're the road team and you go into Cameron, you go into Lexington, you take down Duke, you take down Kentucky. Oh my gosh. That is, and imagine if it's a mid-major, they'd win some of those games, believe it or not. They would be winning those games.
How much player safety and coach safety would go into this as well? Like, if you get, like, the angry students, depending on where you're at, like Tennessee, for example, they're prime candidates for this, I think, because any college football game, you see them upset. They're throwing water bottles, they're throwing trash onto the field. And let's say it's Tennessee, they're a 3 seed, and they somehow lose to, High Point, for example, and they're at home. Like, are the players and coaches at risk here of stuff like that happening? Like somebody storming the court, for example. Like, I don't know. That's something else I would probably have to consider in all this as well.
Yeah, but like that could happen. It could also happen at neutral site games. Like, they still have a ton of their fans. It never happens at neutral site games. I haven't seen anybody get hit with, like water bottles or beer cans or, I haven't seen them get stormed. So
I feel like most of the neutral site games are at, like, professional stadiums. Like, they're in Seattle, they're at Climate Pledge. That's where the Seattle Storm play, and eventually, hopefully, the Supersonics again. So, like, most of these places are playing in actual, like, NBA arenas.
Hey, you'd get that from time to time. I think about we saw it last year with Texas. Texas was throwing stuff on the field, I think, against Georgia.
Yeah.
And then they reversed the call. They're like, you know what? No pass interference. Yeah, well, we don't know why we even threw that in the first place. That was a joke. All right, we got a lot to do here, Eddie. The time is dwindling down. I hate to say that, but we got Gene Steratore to throw at you. I have to admit, Eddie, that I was fully wrong about something. I know you want me to just clear everything else that might be talked about so I can get right to that. I'll do that next. I have to fully admit I was completely wrong about something, but also add that I might be halfway right as well. I'll throw it your way coming up next. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I'm Brian Noen for Jake here on The Fan. You know, peek behind the curtain, Eddie Garrison did promise me some Slayer before the show is over. So he might be saving it for the last part. Save the best for last over here. That's what I'm hoping you didn't forget about that, Eddie. All right, we're sweating out our first half under bet. It's looking okay right now. It's promising between Illinois and Texas. We're at 40 combined points with a little under 6 minutes to go. So we got to be under 61.5. We got to avoid some threes. We got to avoid some pace here, Eddie, and we can go 3-0.
And so most importantly, fouls.
Yep, foul game. That could come back to bite us. You know what's come back to bite us in the men's college tournament here is all these ridiculous reviews. Way too long. Gene Steratore has been vocal about that. We got to expedite the process. Something else that Gene does a great job, by the way, but Gene has chimed in on the Derek Queen buzzer beater. So part of the Crab Five, Derek Queen, freshman sensation, he hits a buzzer beater to win the game yesterday. They take down Colorado State, and there was some talk about, was it a travel? Was this a traveling violation that was not called? Here's what Gene Steratore had to say about that.
By rule, the dribble doesn't end until there's firm possession with one hand locked or more times than not with two hands. So we've got to look to see when the dribble ends. Derek Queen makes the turn around the loop. At that point, when he brings it back up, we don't know if that's fully possessed. If he bobbles that at that point, he could continue to bobble that basketball all the way to the hoop without a travel. So you've got to wait until you can define firm possession. Now the dribble has ended. As I said, most times than not, it's when both hands come together. You can see when Derek Queen has both hands together, 1 foot hits, next foot, great shot, great ending.
Okay. I like that. That makes sense. He could bobble it all the way to the hoop and it wouldn't be traveling. So you have to wait until he firmly has grasp of the ball. So not a travel in his opinion. That's important. I was, selfishly, Eddie, for all these college hoops fans, I don't know why it is where a lot of college hoops fans talk trash about the NBA and sometimes vice versa. We can love both. I love both. March Madness is amazing. I love the NBA. But you know this as well as I do, Eddie. A lot of college hoops fans, they look down on the NBA and they're like, oh, it's the league you never call traveling. Oh, they can't watch it. They never call traveling. I was selfishly rooting for Derek Queen to have gotten away with the traveling violation that wasn't called. For every college hoops fan who is like so high and mighty and can't watch a second of the NBA because no traveling is called, I would have loved for Derek Queen to have traveled. It's not called, and we're reliving that moment time and time and time again. March Madness rolls around. I remember this buzzer beater by Derek Queen. I was rooting for that to be traveling, and Gene Steratore stole my dream right there with his analysis.
You know what one rule is I wish that college would adopt that's in the NBA?
College advance it to half court.
Oh, that's a good one. That's not the one I was thinking of, though.
Okay, what were you thinking of?
The continuation rule.
Oh, you know what? The NBA has gotten way more like college, and I hate it. I love the continuation.
I do too, but the college is like zero. No continuation at all.
That's right. You're right about that. Well, that's the thing. You're supposed to at least be in the gather, right? And
yes.
if there's contact and you finish, it's supposed to be continuation. They give you that in the NBA. They're a lot more strict than they used to be. They don't give the continuation like they used to. But you're right. There's none in college. I would like to see that changed. Because, yeah, there are plenty of times where I'm like, how is that not an and one? College coaches, college players are like, how? He clobbered me on the way to the rim. I wasn't dribbling anymore. How is that not 2 points? So I'm with you on that. Absolutely. Okay, Eddie, let me throw this at you where I was completely wrong. You might love this. You might be rolling on this. You might cut this up, make it for drops. I don't know what you got going on here, but we're talking about the Colts situation with Mike Chappell, with Anthony Richardson, and Eddie, is 47% completion percentage last year? What are we doing? We cracked on Tebow for so long, as we should have, it's like Richardson's completion percentage is in that territory. That is ridiculously bad. So I was not wrong on that. I was skeptical of Anthony Richardson, not a lot of reps in college, got hurt his rookie year. He's so far behind in his development, and it's showing. You got to have a respectable completion percentage. It's not even approaching respectability. So I was right about that. In the same division, quite wrong on C.J. Stroud. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, I saw a mock draft, Mel Kiper Jr., he's got the Packers taking Ohio State receiver Emeka Egbuka. If that happens, Emeka Egbuka would be the 5th first-round wide receiver that C.J. Stroud was teammates with at Ohio State. Okay? C.J. Stroud, he had teammates Garrett Wilson with the Jets, Chris Olave with the Saints. Those guys were drafted 10th and 11th in the 22 draft. Right? We're talking top 11 draft picks. Jackson Smith and Jigba, a year later, he goes 20th to the Seahawks. And then we had Marvin Harrison Jr., 4th overall last year to the Cardinals. Emeka Egbuka would be the 5th first-round wide receiver that C.J. Stroud was teammates with at the Ohio State. Full disclosure here, before the draft, I thought C.J. Stroud could very well be a bust. That has not been the case. Completely wrong. Horrible evaluation. I still have nightmares about it, right? But he was surrounded, Eddie, by so much talent at Ohio State that I thought he was going to struggle in the NFL. He was sensational his rookie season. Last year, though, came back to earth. 20 touchdown passes, 12 picks. Passer rating was 87. Eddie, those are Ryan Tannehill type numbers. Those are not good numbers. So here's the question I have. If you look at C.J. Stroud, is he just an average guy? He looked like he was potentially going to be a star after his rookie season. But in the AFC South, from the Colts' point of view, this is a big deal. If C.J. Stroud is just average or slightly better than average, that's way different than a star quarterback that you have to deal with for the next decade plus. And I don't want to overreact to a sophomore slump, because I still think C.J. Stroud is very talented, and he proved that he's a guy in his first year. But it's possible that he's just average. And I think it's all how you look at it, too. If you look at it from a Colts standpoint, who would you rather have, Anthony Richardson or C.J. Stroud in Indianapolis right now? It's an absolute no-brainer. C.J. Stroud by 50 miles. But if you're a Texans fan and you look at it and say, hey, is C.J. Stroud good enough in the AFC when you got Mahomes and Burrow and Josh Allen and Lamar and Herbert and you got all these guys. Like, is he good enough, or is he just a little bit better than average? That's a legitimate question now after Stroud's second season and then his first season, Eddie.
I'm fascinated to see how he bounces back in year number 3. Of course, they get rid of Bobby Slowick just a year after he was getting head coaching interviews down there in Houston. So I'm interested to see if it was the offensive coordinator and the lack of creativity and play calling that was the reason why C.J. Stroud struggled a bit last season. But also, Houston's offensive line was very bad last year. It was not good, and then they get rid of pretty much everybody. They trade Laramie Tunsil, and now they're kind of rebuilding that offensive line. And I wonder if they're trying to do that to try to benefit C.J. Stroud just because of the fact that there was so much inconsistencies last year with guys getting hurt and a constant rotation up front. And you heard a little bit of D'Amico Ryans during the course of like the combine talking about that he wanted to rebuild it because the culture up front in that offensive line wasn't what he was wanting. And you see it kind of coming to fruition with the trade of Laramie Tunsil. So now does C.J. Stroud look more like the rookie C.J. Stroud if they can get the offensive line right in front of him? Because you still have Nico Collins and you still have Tank Dell when he comes back from injury, and Joe Mixon and Dalton Schultz, I think he's still down there. I can't remember if they got rid of him or not, but they're going to be opportunities for C.J. Stroud to bounce back.
Yeah, and his former Ohio State guy, Cade Stover. You know, he's the backup tight end over there, 4th-round pick. So, yeah, listen, Nico Collins is a guy. And they picked up Cam Robinson to fill in for Laramie Tunsil. So Cam Robinson's like the fill-in solution guy. You know, it's like, Minnesota, we lost our left tackle. Bring in Cam Robinson. Like Houston, we traded away our left tackle. Bring in Cam Robinson. But yeah, CJ Stroud, not exactly elusive, and not a guy that's going to scramble around and buy time if the offensive line is leaky. So I'm not selling my stock. I'm not all out on CJ Stroud, but it's a legitimate question to say, hey, is he just a little bit better than average, or is he average? He was completely average his second season, so it'd be interesting to see how he rebounds from that. But that's at least encouraging from a Colts standpoint, because it looked like this dude, after his rookie year, he could be on par with like Mahomes and Burrow and Allen. He could be on that level potentially. And after his second year, he's not in the top 10 right here, right now. So that's helpful from a Colts perspective. All right, coming up next. This guy doesn't play for your favorite team, but his story is absolutely connected to your favorite team. I want to throw a question your way relating to this. That's coming up next. I'm Brian Noe, in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Man, I'm Brian Noon for Jake here on The Fan. Eddie Garrison, you came bearing gifts here. Bearing gifts. Eddie Van Garrison, thank you so much. You shouldn't have. That's the gift that keeps on giving, known as Slayer. Oh, tremendous. Have you ever gone to a Slayer concert, Eddie? You know, fun fact, I went to see Slayer. I went to see Slayer in Indianapolis years ago. That's a true story. I've been there. I can't remember the place. It was I cannot remember. I can't remember. It's been a long time ago, but yeah.
This may shock you, but no, I have not attended a Slayer concert.
Eddie. It's a missed opportunity right there. Hopefully they'll be through town here sometime. I saw Lamb of God in Indianapolis not that long ago either. They're still touring. You know, Eddie, maybe we'll go catch Lamb of God next time they're in Indianapolis.
That was recent, wasn't it? Just like maybe like last year, a year and a half ago, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah, I don't think it was that long ago. Yeah, it was somewhere in that neighborhood. Hey, before we get out of here, I wanted to throw something your way. So this player didn't play for your favorite team, most likely, unless you root for Kansas State basketball. But his story is connected to your favorite team, whoever it may be. So this is Coleman Hawkins. He transferred from Illinois, went to Kansas State, signed an NIL deal worth $2 million. It was publicized. He didn't like that. So he told Field of 68 on Friday, this is his quote, "Whatever the number was never should have been public. That's not my fault. I won't say whose fault it is. But when there is a tweet from Shams Charania and people share your information, that's not cool." So the question is this. Do you think these NIL deals, whatever a kid agrees to, whatever he signs for, should that be kept private? My thing would be this. I can see where the players, the kids, they would want that to remain private. Some of them would want it to be publicized and be like, "Hey, check it out, man. I just signed for $5 million." You know, believe it or not, there are a lot of young kids that would like that to be publicized. They're publicizing that they just ate a ham sandwich for lunch, you know, like their life is on social media a lot of times. So believe it or not, some would love that to be publicized. But for the ones that want to keep it private, should it be like that? I wouldn't have a problem if it is. I think it's newsworthy. But my thing is, that's not going to stop any type of negativity or abuse. If you keep this private, the idea that, oh, okay, all problems solved, that's not the way it's going to go at all. Like, unfortunately, the world we live in, there are a lot of idiots who take their anger out on athletes. That's not going to change. You could get rid of NIL deals being publicized. You could get rid of prop bets. You could get rid of gambling as a whole. Good luck. If there was any magical way you could wave the wand and do that, there's still going to be negativity and abuse taking place. Caleb Love at Arizona is a great target. You know, he's the J.R. Smith of college basketball. He's streaky. Sometimes he's lighting it up. Other times he can't buy a shot. So he's an easy target. People go after this guy all the time. I hate that that's the reality, but that's what's at play here. So I wouldn't have an issue with NIL deals remaining private, terms not being disclosed if that's what the kids want. But the idea of like, oh man, all negativity, all backlash, all criticism is gone. That's not even close to realistic. And Eddie, you got some news. We got an IU player in the portal, right?
Yeah, that's right. Mackenzie Mbako is in the transfer portal for Indiana. Tonight, Pacers take on the T-Wolves. It sounds like Benedict Mathurin is questionable. Anthony Edwards also questionable. So there's a little bit of an update about tonight's Pacers game as well.
Look at that. Double update. Double dip right there. But listen, if Mbako, if he hits the portal and he signs, let's just say he signs a big NIL deal and the terms are publicized and he's not living up to that and there's some backlash, that could happen. But guess what? If the terms are private, you never know what they are, and he goes somewhere else and he stinks, guess what? There are going to be fans saying, "What the hell?" And it just goes from there. Like,
This is the problem with NIL.
utopia.
Like professional athletes, their contracts get leaked, and if they want to be treated as, professional athletes, and this is the type of stuff that happens sometimes.
By the way, before we go, Eddie, 3-0. 3-0. We hit the first half under in this Texas-Illinois game. We're going to quit while we're ahead. Huh? How's that sound? Good being with you, Eddie Van Garrison. Everybody who's listened, really appreciate the time. JMV coming up next. Keep it locked here on The Fan.